I'm Mosharraf Rahman, lecturer accounting, Haji Misir University College. Today our lecture subject is business communication and report writing. Business communication report writing, B.B.A honors, second year subject. Now I'm going to discuss the first chapter, introduction to business, introduction to communication. Our today discussion topics two-way communication and its importance. What is two-way communication? The communication that takes between the two parties, sender and receiver, is known as the two-way communication. The communication that takes place between two parties, sender and receiver, is known as two-way communication. But the main feature of the two-way communication is the flow the information from the both way. The main feature of the two-way communication is the flow of information from both ways. The two-way communication first sender send the message. The two-way communication first send the sender message and receiver provide the response to the sender, and receiver provide the response to the sender. From the above discussion, the major feature of two-way communication can be listed as follows. One, two parties, sender and receiver, two parties, sender and receiver, flow of information from both way, and third is the feedback, So in summary, we can say when the two persons communicate and receive the message and send the feedback to the sender, that is called the two-way communication. To make a effective communication, we need to ensure two-way communication. Now I'm going to discuss our second part of the question, two-way communication importance. The two-way communication can be discussed the following manners. First, effective communication. Communication expert advocated that two-way communication is the real communication where exchange of idea is possible. Where exchange the idea is possible. That means effective communication need two-way communication. Without two-way communication, we cannot make a effective communication. Second is implementation of discussion. In the organization, decision we made by top management, but those are implemented by the lower level employees. If there is no two-way communication, the proper implementation of discussion will not be possible. That means to implement any kind of planning or decision to the organization, we need two-way communication. Two-way communication and feedback from one side, from other side. Then we can implement any kind of planning, any kind of decision of organization. And third is better understanding. Where there is no counter flow of the information or feedback, there the level of understanding between the sender and receiver also very poor. Only two-way communication ensure the better understanding. That means to make a good relationship from one department to other department, one person to other person, one business organization to another business organization, we need to ensure two-way communication. That will not be possible better understanding without the two-way communication in the business and in personal life in anywhere. So better understanding need to ensure two-way communication. Our fourth point is employee motivation. It has been proved that the organization where the scope for the two-way communication exists, the management can collect more information about the attitudes of the employees. As a result, it is become the easier to the part of the management and take the proper motivation measurement. That means to motivate the employee of the organization, we need to know the characteristic of the employee. Every employee is not the same characteristic and attitudes of the organization. So two-way communication need to ensure the motivation of the employee of the organization. And 5 is reduce the employee turnover. Reduce the employee turnover. Two-way communication between the management and employee. Two-way communication between the management and employee reduce the misunderstanding and reduce the misunderstanding in any kind of crisis. As a result, employee turnover rate reduce considerably. considerably. That means when we make a effective two-way communication from person by person, that understanding and bonding of the employee of the organization is make very good. So they are stay in the organization in long time. For that reason, we reduce the employee turnover. 6, increasing productivity. Increasing productivity. Two-way communication helps the employee motivation. Two-way communication helps the employee motivation. The job satisfaction of the employees increase. In turn, the productivity of the firm increase. Productivity of the firm increased. To increase the productivity of the organization, we need to ensure two-way communication of the organization. Therefore, it can be safely stated that the two-way communication has immense importance the achievement of the goal of the organization. So, the point can be noted. First, the importance of two-way communication, effective communication, implementation of decision, better understanding, employee motivation, reduce the employee turnover, increasing the productivity, increase the productivity. Now I'm going to our another question, communication model and its importance. Communication model and its importance. Model is a theoretically or symbolic presentation of the process of sequential activities. The very process of the transmission of information for the sender to receiver is represented by the communication model. In the other word, communication model describe how the communication works. That means by using the communication model, we can fulfill our communication process and fulfill our communication system and goal our communication goal. According to the professor Lessiker and Pitti said that in this presentation of the level, in this presentation of the model, we strive to look with scientific diligence into the phenomenon of human communication. That means the communication model is the theoretical view of the communication process which describe how one person communicate to another person. How one person communicate to another person. In a communication model, there is indicated that how one department will communicate another department, how one person is communicate with another person. That is the model of communication. That is the model of communication. The function or importance and advantage of communication model. Function or importance and advantage of communication model. The communication model provide the clear picture communication model provides the clear picture regarding the communication process, and it serves the following purpose. First is the basic idea of human communication. First is the basic idea of the human communication. The communication model, we can get the basic idea from the human communication process, because human communication process is the critical. By set up the communication model, we can communicate with different person in different way. Second is identify steps. The communication model also helps us to identify the sequential step of communication. That means step-by-step communication process is given in the communication model. Third is evaluation of effectiveness. The model effectiveness of any communication can be evaluated. Thus, necessary measures can be taken to increase the effectiveness of the communication. Fourth is minimization barriers. Analysis the communication model also helps to delete or decrease the barrier and problem of the communication. By using the communication model, we can reduce the communication problem of the organization. Analysis and communication environment. The study of communication model also provides the guidelines for analyzing and communication environment, which is also essential to ensure the effective communication. That means by using the communication model, we can find out the communication problem and we can develop the communication environments of the organization. So that was the communication model importance. So point again, I mentioned basic idea of the human communication, identify the step evaluation of effectiveness, minimizing barrier, analysis of communication environment. Now I'm going to discuss our next question, limitation of communication model. Though communication model plays a vital role in understanding the communication process, but it is the more backward or limitation, but it has some backward and limitation. Limitation of the communication model are as follows. Brief explanation. The communication model is just a framework having the brief explanation, but information cannot be achieved from it. It is a model to implement the model. We cannot get information from the particular source. That is the limited of business communication model. Lack of flexibility. The basic communication model are not fixable in nature. The basic communication model are not fixed in the model, but the communication is the dynamic and the changing thing. The communication is the dynamic and changing things. Sometimes it's a different copy up and with a model. So communication process that will be depend on the basis of the situation, on the basis of the condition, environment. Communication process is changed. But when we follow the communication, model, that will not be possible to read to variance our communication. Limited scope. Most of the communication models are suitable for the face-to-face or written communication, but the model cannot be described the framework of the telecommunication or model of modern means of communication. Limitation of escape. That means on the basis of the situation, we can communicate a person to person, face to face, and written communication. But communication model cannot be explained how and what we written in our written document or face-to-face communication. That is the limitation of communication model. Limitation of communication model point is noted again: brief explanation, lack of flexibility, limited scope. Our next question: what are the difference between the communication process and communication model? What are the difference between the communication process and communication model? Communication process and communication model are related with each other. Graphical presentation of the communication is called the communication model. So there are some point of distinguish between them. The first point is definition. What is communication process? Communication process is a method through which information transmitted between the two parties. That means communication is the process to exchange the news, views, and information and opinion one person to another person by using the media. That is called communication process. And communication model, what is communication model? Communication model is a graphically presentation of the communication process with any figure or visual method. That means communication model is a structure-based process that is presented graphically and visual method. Nature. Communication process describe the basic element of the communication. Communication process describe the basic element of the communication process, but communication model presented the element of the communication graphically. Presentation the elements of communication graphically. Third point, presentation. Communication process present with language or other techniques. Communication process presented with language and other techniques, but communication model presented with the figure or visual model. Channel. Point of difference 4 is channel. It can be transmitted through audio or video channel. Communication process is transmitted by audio or video channel, but communication model only through the video channel, only through the video model. Point of difference 5 is identification. In communication process cannot identify the problem that occurred in the communication. In the communication process, it is not identify the problem and occurred in communication, but in communication model it helps to identify the problem of communication. Communication model helps to identify the communication problem. Point on difference 6 is cost. Communication process has no cost. Communication process has no cost and less effort in communication, but communication model is a expensive style for communication system. Communication model is an expensive style for a communication model. And point of difference 7 is scope. Communication process has a huge amount of area or scope. Communication model has the huge amount of area or scope, but communication model has limited and narrow scope. From the above discussion, we can easily say that communication process and communication model are correlated with each other. but they are basically and conceptually related one another significantly. The point of difference between the communication process and communication model are noted again. First is definition, second nature, third presentation, fourth channel, five identification, six cost, and seven scope. Now our next question, necessity of feedback. Necessity of feedback. Why we need feedback? Feedback is the final link of communication process. Feedback is the final link of communication process. It puts the response or receiver back into the process and complete the communication cycle. Thus, communication is essential and indispensable for effective communication. Feedback must be provided within the communication system to make the certain that mutual understanding is achieved. We need feedback or we necessity feedback for below matters. First is understand receiver view. First is understand receiver view. Feedback, the reaction of the receiver. Feedback, the reaction can be receiver can be easily understood and flowing step can be taken. Flowing step can be taken. Understanding the receiver view in need feedback. Completing the communication process. Completing the communication process. In fact, without the feedback, there is no communication at all. Whatever the message of the sender is accepted or rejected, used and not by the receiver can be realized without feedback. Without completing feedback, communication process is incomplete. By getting feedback, we can know the receiver opinion by receiving feedback. Third is achieving of goal. Every and each communication has predetermined objective. Through the feedback, the objective can be achieved. To achieve the goal of the organization, every communication needs to feedback. Effective decision making. Without the organization, the feedback of the employees and can help the top level management in taking effective decision. To make an effective decision, we need to feedback from top level to lower level, from lower level to top level. When that will be possible, the effective decision can be made by getting necessity feedback. And 5 is prerequisite for the future communication. Feedback of the previous communication is a precondition of the future communication. Thus, that can be related the effective communication response from the receiver feedback is necessary. Finally, it can be stated that the feedback is not only the improve the communication, but also enhance the managerial performance. That means by getting the proper feedback from one department to another department, from one person to another person, we can enrich our information, we can solve our problem, and we can know our problem from lower level to top level to lower level, and that can enhance, that can increase the managerial performance. And when we increase the managerial performance, our business goal or our organization goal can be achieved. So that was the necessity of the feedback. The point can be noted again. Understanding the receiver view, completing the communication process. Third is achievement of the goal. Fourth is effectiveness of the decision. Five is prerequisition of the further information. Our today business communication class is over here, and we invite to watch our next class.